Good day! We are the Group 6 Yellow Green, and we are here to report about the School of Management Thoughts. But first, let's see who our members are.
What is School of Management Thought? It is the theoretical framework used to study management, wherein each thought is based on different assumptions about human beings and the organizations that they are in. Over time, nakahanap yung mga management thinkers kung paano nila i-analyze at i-organize yung mga information tungkol sa management base sa mga data na nakuha nila. Yung mga attempts na yun ang naging dahilan kung paano na-identify yung mga management schools. The first management school is called the Classical School, wherein it seeks to manage workers and organizations more efficiently. Under Classical School are scientific management, bureaucratic management, and administrative management. But what are those? First, scientific management can be defined as the systematic study of work methods having the main goal of improving efficiency and creating a mental revolution in the workplace. This theory was laid by the stalwarts like F.W. Taylor, H.L. Gant, and William Gilbert during the 1880s. The next theory under classical school is the bureaucratic management. This focuses on the ideal form of organization as the bureaucracy is proposed. Ang bureaucracy ay mga bagay na makakapagbigay ng effective na management, kagaya ng division of labor at pagkakaroon ng formalized na rules. Then si Max Weber ang naging major contributor dito noong 1920. The last management thought under the classical school is the administrative management. This focuses on the management processes and principles of management. While Henry Fayol, who is the major contributor of this management thought, termed the word management as a universal process with different functions which will be discussed later on. Next, the second school of management thought is the behavioral school. It is composed of the human relations and behavioral science. This school mainly focuses on understanding the factors that could affect human behavior at work. The first thing under the behavioral school is the human relations. Here, the Hawthorne experiment was done by the group of researchers led by Elton Mayo. This experiment explained and stated that the productivity of the employees isn't only about their wages, but also their satisfaction inside the workplace and how they participate in the social groups. Lastly, the behavioral science. It was a natural progression of the human relation as it focuses more on applying the conceptual and analytical tools such as studying the worker's personality, attitudes, values, and motivations to understand and predict the behavior in the workplace.
We also have the quantitative school, which involves the use of quantitative techniques such as statistics, information models, and computer simulations to improve decision making. This school consists of several branches, which are management science, operations management, and management information system. Management science encourages managers to use mathematics, statistics, and other quantitative techniques to make management decisions. Managers can use computer models, science applications, mathematical forecasting, inventory modeling, and many more. Meanwhile, operations management focuses on managing the process of transforming materials, labor, and capital into useful goods and/or services. W. Edwards Deming exerted a tremendous influence in shaping modern ideas about improving productivity and quality. Management Information System, or MIS, is the most recent subfield of the quantitative school. MIS organizes past, present, and projected data from both internal and external sources and processes it into useful information, which it then makes available to managers at all organizational levels. Next, we have the Systems School, which focuses on understanding the organization as an open system that transforms inputs into outputs. A system is composed of four elements: inputs, transformation processes, outputs, and feedback. Inputs undergo transformation processes to meet the organization's goal, the outputs. Feedback includes the comments from customers or clients using the products. Lastly, the contingency school, which applies management principles and processes depending on the situation at face. Contingency management recognizes that there is no one best way to manage. This type of management understands situational differences and responds appropriately to them.
There are three ingredients that came together to spark industrial revolution: power, machinery innovation, and transportation. There were a lot of emerging issues at the time that people needed to grapple with. They were new. Large groups of people were working together. People working alongside machinery, the pace of industry was speeding up very quickly, and companies were looking for more effective ways to handle their new challenges. And today, we're going to look at three major perspectives of management that helped them at the time: classical, humanistic, and management science. First, let's go with classical perspective. Classical perspectives is to make organizations efficient operation machines, and it contains the following subfields. Let's start with scientific management. It emphasized the decisions based on rules of thumb be replaced with precise procedures. Frederick Taylor used the term scientific management for his approach. To him, this meant applying science to work. He popularized time and motion studies to study how much time every single task should take, and how many motions every single task should take, and we can speed things up and come up with the one right way. The next one is bureaucratic management. It emphasized management on an impersonal, rational basis through elements such as clearly defined authority and responsibility, record keeping, and separation of management and ownership. Max Weber was most known for his term bureaucracy. He said that organization should look like the extension of government and legal system. He wanted a legal rational approach to organizing. That meant that he didn't want to follow the traditional family type system where the head of the family was in charge. He thought that this was not the right way to run large organizations, and he wanted a legal rational approach where he saw each person's authority should be tied to his or her position in the organization. He was against favoritism, and he wanted to hire the best people to work in organizations. And lastly, administrative principles. It focused on the productivity of the total organization rather than the productivity of the individual worker. Henry Fayol was looking at the management side of things on how should we manage people. He believed that managers needed to be trained in a much more systematic approach. He saw a lack of management theory in his day, so he wanted to contribute in that discussion. He talked about management activities that managers should be competent at, which is planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling that will be discussed later on. The next one is humanistic perspective. It emphasized the importance of human behaviors, needs, and attitude in a workplace and social interactions and group processes. Its major components include human relations movement. Human relations movement directly responded to social pressures for enlightened treatment of employees and the notion that human relations was the best approach for increasing productivity, a belief that persists today. Human relations perspectives. It suggests that jobs should be designed to meet higher level needs by allowing workers to use their full potential. Lastly, behavioral science approach. It is focused on the psychological and sociological processes such as attitude, motivations, and group dynamics that influence employee performance. While the classic approach is focused on the work done by employees, the behavioral science approach to management focuses on the employee themselves. Lastly, the management science perspectives developed during World War II to find solutions to warfare. It uses mathematical models to solve problems, also known as quantitative approach. The approach analyzes a mix of feasibilities, constraints, and costs to enable management to make decisions. The management science approach is a type of organizational environment theory. It combines rational thought with intuitive insight to resolve management concerns such as cost, production, and service levels. So now let's discuss the scientific method approach that is used in management science. The scientific method approach is a five-step process in resolving management problems or any type of problems. The first step in this approach is observation. In observation, we must understand first what the situation is all about. After observation, the next step is to define the problem and what do we need to achieve. Setting of objectives. After you observe and define the problem, the next crucial step is to construct a model. In model construction, we must create an abstract representation of a problem. We must translate this problem to a mathematical or logical way. We must know what the variables involved. After you have construct a model, the next step is solution. This is the logical resolve to the problem. And the last step is to implement the solution to the problem. This is the execution of the problem.
Contributors to management thought. First is Henry Fayol. Henry Fayol is a big name in the classical management area of organizational studies, the administrative science area. Fayol was a French engineer by training, and when he looked around at the tail end of the Industrial Revolution, he saw a great need for a systematic approach to train managers. So we're going to sort through the activities of industrial that he explained in his book, the managerial functions, and then the general principles of management. Fayol saw 6 activities of industry. First is the technical. That means the production and manufacturing concerns. Second, commercial. That's the buying and the selling and exchanging of goods and services. Third, financial. That's where you search for and use capital or money optimally. Fourth, security. That's the protection of property and people. 5. Accounting. That's the balance sheets, the cost, and keeping track of all that. And 6, which has his real area of concern, was the managerial activity. That means the planning, organizing, command, coordination, and control. Functions of management according to Fayol are: first is planning. Managers need to look ahead and chart a course for the organization. They also needed organizational skills. They need to select and arrange people in the best way possible. They needed to be in command. That meant they were overseeing things. They needed to lead and then stay out of the details. Coordination was another important responsibility. They needed to harmonize and facilitate the work between and among the different departments in their organization. They also had to maintain control. They were to ensure compliance on all those other areas like accounting, finance, technical, and quality control. Fayol also outlined the principles of management. First is division of work. This means to increase productivity. Second is authority and responsibility. In other words, the manager has the right to give orders and exact obedience. Third is discipline. That means obedience, application, and energy on the part of the individual employee. Fourth, managers should pursue unity of command. In other words, an employee should receive orders from one supervisor only. Number 5, unity of direction. That means one head and one plan for a group of activities having the same direction. Number 6 is subordination of individual interest to general interest. That means that you as an individual employee should put your personal interest aside and pursue the greater purpose. Number 7 is the remuneration of personnel. He thought people should be paid fairly and rewarded for what he called well-directed effort. Number 8 is centralization. Fayol believed that it was up to the manager to figure out the right balance of both centralized decision making versus decentralized decision making and power. Number 9 is scalar chain. We call it the chain of command. He called it the chain of superiors, where you would go up the chain and then cut across the organization somewhere and then down the chain of command to speak to somebody on the other side. Number 10 is order. That meant that right man in the right place to form an effective social order. Number 11 is equity. He had a desire for equity and the equality of treatment when dealing with people. Number 12, he believed in the stability of tenure and personnel. He wanted people to stay in their jobs when they were good at their jobs. Number 13, initiative. Managers should encourage and inspire the initiative of employees. And 14, spirit de corps. He wanted to establish unity and harmony in organization. The significant contributions made by Fayol are: first, universality of management, which means that management is a separate body of knowledge is applicable to all forms of group activities. Second, he specified the functions of management by a systematic analysis of management process. Third, the concept of teaching and developing management curricular in colleges and universities. And last, his ideas paved the way for the development of the theory of management. Next is the contribution of Frederick Taylor, 1856 to 1915, the father of scientific management. He was a mechanical engineer and management consultant. Taylor wanted to step in and make organization more standardized, efficient, and productive by studying their work processes closely. He wanted to break away from the common sense rule of thumb that he was as unproven and inefficient. Scientific management is also known as Taylorism. 3 areas of focus. First is task performance. The efficiency and quality of work is linked to the kind of person selected for taking up different jobs. Taylor wanted a radical change in the methods and procedures of selecting workers. Workers should be selected by considering their education, experience, and attitude towards work. Second is supervision. Taylor pleaded the concept of functional foremanship. He felt that workers and factory executives should be freed from the burden of planning and designing. Functional foremanship is the extension of the principle of specialization or division of labor to the sphere of management. Third, motivation. Taylor believed money was the way to motivate workers to their fullest capabilities. Principles. First is science. No rule of thumb. Replace working by rule of thumb or simple habit and common sense and instead use the scientific method to study work. Second, harmony, not discord. Third, cooperation, not individualism. Fourth, maximum output, not restricted. Number 5, development of each man to highest capacity and ability. This means scientifically select and then train, teach and develop the worker, rather than simply assign workers to just any job. Match workers to their jobs based on their capabilities and motivation, and then train them to work at maximum efficiency. And last, maximum prosperity of employees coupled with maximum prosperity of organization. Divide work and responsibility almost equally between management and workers. Mental revolution. Simply stated, mental revolution is concerned with bringing basic changes in the mental attitude of workers and the management towards each other. Scientific approach means radical changes in the approach to solve problems regarding work and managerial control. Techniques of scientific management. First, time study. It circumscribes the conventional time taken to complete a well-defined job. Second, motion study. Pertains to the study of movements like putting objects, lifting, changing position, and sitting, etc., which are moved while doing a conventional job. Third, method study. The purpose of the outline study is to find out one vigorous way of performing the job. Next is fatigue study. A person is obliged to feel tired mentally and physically if she or he does not relax while working. Next, differential wage system. Wage rates should be fixed in such a way that the average worker is induced to attain a standard output. Scientific task planning. It is essential to set a standard task which an average worker source does during a working day. Next is standardization plus simplification. Simplification points at erasing unnecessary types and sizes and dimensions, while standardization intends devising new types rather than the existing ones. And last, functional foremanship is a factory administration system that supports for possessing numerous foremen in separate functional roles.
Next contributor of management thought is Max Weber. Weber is a German social scientist who argued that bureaucracy was the most efficient and rational model private businesses and public offices could operate in. But ano nga bang bureaucracy? Bureaucracy has a multi-layered systems and processes, meaning meron itong sistema na nagpapanatili ng uniformity and control within the management. Weber classified bureaucratic management, which focuses on the overall organizational system. Merong dalawang criteria Weber within bureaucratic management is based upon. First is based on the ability and skills na meron ng isang employee to handle a specific position, and the other one is if the person is the best choice which is suitable to be assigned in that particular position. Then, Max Weber has 6 characteristics of bureaucracy. First is the task specialization or the division of labor. Based on the words itself, basically complex work is broken down into simple jobs. Next is hierarchical management structure. There is a hierarchy of position in the management which serves as a line of communication and delegation of authority. Next, formal selection rules. Technical skills and competencies are vital requirements in choosing an employee. Ito ay based sa edukasyon, eksperyensa at mga trainings na na-acquire ng isang employee, and no other factors should be considered. Inefficient and uniform requirements, rules are imposed and strictly enforced to promote uniformity within the organization and keeps the company running as smooth and efficiently as possible. Interpersonal environment. When decisioning a certain matter, an individual should be a rational thinker and decide just based on the facts. Lastly, achievement-based advancement. Promoting people on the basis of objective merit rather than favoritism. Nakabase dito ang capabilities and skills ng isang individual para siya ay ma-promote at hindi dahil may backer or malakas siya sa mga nakatataas. In bureaucracy, meron tayong advantages and disadvantages. In advantages, magiging consistent ang behavior ng mga employee. It can also eliminate conflicting job duties. May ma-maximize ang paggamit ng human resources at magpapatuloy ang pagtakbo ng organization ng smooth and progressive. However, disadvantages of bureaucracy includes employees will more likely to think
less for the organization, and probably there is a resistance to change. Another contributor of management thought is George Elton Mayo. Mayo is the father of neoclassical approach, which he leads the Hawthorne experiments. This experiment is conducted at a plant at Western Electric Company wherein Mayo observed different phases for the Hawthorne experiment. The illumination experiments wherein tinest niya yung epekto ng lightning sa productivity ng employee at influence ng pakikipag-ugnayan ng mga tao sa behavior nila sa trabaho. Relay assembly test room studies, mass interview, bank wiring observation room study wherein it determines effect of payment incentive on the productivity. There are two approaches under these Hawthorne experiments. First is human relation approach na kung saan patuloy na binibigyang motibasyon ang bawat employee upang magkaroon ng teamwork sa organization. Dumedirekta ito sa pag-satisfy ng sosyal at psikolohiyal na pangangailangan ng mga employee upang sila ay mas maging produktibo at naipapakita ang tunay na concern sa mga manggagawa. The other one is the behavioral science approach. Kung kanina ay nakatuon sa psikolohiyal na pangangailangan ng bawat empleyado, ngayon, ang behavioral science approach ay nakatuon sa training and development ng bawat individual. This also use innovation reward and incentive system. There is also called Hawthorne effect. It is an observation that recognition and show of concern affect employees significantly. It is a form of reactivity and describes as temporary change to behavior or performance in response to a change in the environmental conditions. Basically, productivity increased because attention was paid to the workers in the experiment. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory by Abraham Maslow which puts forward that people are motivated by 5 basic categories of needs. Physiological, which consist ng basic necessities natin tulad ng food, water, shelter, and like that. Safety, love, esteem, and self-actualization. Higher needs in the hierarchy begin to emerge when people feel they have sufficiently satisfied the previous need.
Management thought approaches. First, what is management thought approaches? It is efficiently accomplish selected aims. Management encompasses an array of different functions undertaken to accomplish a task. Successfully process of designing and maintaining environment in which individuals working together in groups efficiently accomplish selected aims in many approaches. The first approach, classical approach, one of the oldest approaches in management, also known in various names. It also known as empirical, functional, and management processes approach, represents by traditional thoughts about organizations. Classical approach has 3 different areas of studies. The first is a scientific management, theory of management that analyzes and synthesizes workflows with the objective of improving labor productivity. Synthesizes by Frederick Winslow Taylor, also known as father of scientific management. The second area is administrative management. Henry Fayol is a major contributor of this study, deals with largely with jobs and works at the individual level of analysis. The last section is bureaucratic management, focuses on the ideal form of organization. Next approach is behavioral approach, developed because of perceived weaknesses in the assumption of the classical approach, focus on the trying to understand the factors affect human behavior at work. There are 3 elements in behavioral approach. The first is individual. Individual differences must be recognized. An individual has feelings, emotion, perceptions, and attitude. The inner world of the worker is more important than the external reality in the determination of productivity. Next element is work groups. Workers are not isolated. They are social beings and should be treated as such by management. The next section is participative management. The emergence of participate management is inevitable when emphasis is laid on the individual and work on groups. Allowing labor to participate in decision making primarily in increased productivity was a new form of supervision. Next approach is quantitative approach, also called as mathematical approach and management science approach, involves in the use of mathematical or quantitative approach for decision making, more often called operations research. Managerial decisions are based on more scientific techniques of proving quantitative base. Management is viewed as a system of logical process. Systematic approach composed of elements or subsystems that are related and dependent on each other. Based on the generalized that organization is a system and its components are interrelated and interdependent. The next approach is contingency approach, also called situational approach. There cannot be particular management action which will suitable for all situations. The only action is designed on the basis of external environment, internal states, and needs, suggests practical solutions to organizational problems. In the contingency approach, there are three conceptual framework. The first is environment, which is independent. Management. The second is management concepts, principles, and techniques. It is dependent. Contingent relationship between the two. The functions of executive, written by Chester Bernard, viewed executive as a component for a formal organization and later as a part of entire cooperative system involving physical, biological, social, and psychological elements. The system approach allows us to see the critical variables and constants, these elements which do not change, and their interaction with another.
Organized cooperation has been concerned since the beginning of civilization. So, ano sinasabi dito? Simula daw nung unang panahon, nung nalaman ng mga tao na kailangan nilang mabuhay as a group in order to comply with their objectives, in order to survive. Ayun, nagsimula ito nung early days of man, mga unang civilization. Yung mga leaders, nakagawa nilang i-organize yung mga tao into various groups with according to their strength, their mental capabilities, their intelligence for a certain objective. Now, there are examples of this. Here, organization and management were recognized in the Buddhist order Sangha as far back as 530 BC. Another example of this is the olden days of the Roman Catholic Church. Yung system of the church is governed by management. Another is the military forces as well as the ancient Greece. These are all mainly follows the nature of management. And now, because of nung dumating ang Industrial Revolution, kailangan nang mag-adapt. Kailangan mag-adapt ng mga management theory concepts into more holistic, more formal management theory. Kailangan ng yung mga simple, kailangan ng mas complex in order to cope up with the changing time. Moving on to the importance of management theory. Bakit nga ba ito importante? The knowledge of management theory and techniques is important in order to, one, increase efficiency. Ito ang bukang bibig ng IE. Kaya nga IE, pwede mong sabihin, increase efficiency. Now, number two, crystallize the nature of management. We mean crystallize by solidify, no? Linawin. Kailangan malinaw, kailangan discrete kung ano at paano ang mangyayari sa management, sa mga tao. Next is 3. Improve research in management. Now, going back to 1, increase efficiency. Ngayon, paano natin magagawa ang mag-increase ang efficiency? Paano natin mahanap yung mga sagot, mga solutions? Well, we do that by doing research. We research, we gather data, and we research, and we find solutions, and we execute those solutions. Now, Moving on to the fourth, coordinating the efforts of people so that objectives of individuals get translated into social accomplishments and social goals of the organization can be attained. Ngayon, sa dami ng sinabi ko sa four, I can summarize it as leadership. Now, a manager is a leader. Kailangan niyang i-lead ang mga subordinates niya sa kanilang personal goals or sa kanilang personal objectives, and then also sa objective ng group, and also furthermore the objective of the organization.
Historical forces to management thought. Looking back at the historical perspective of a management from its environment explains the current opportunities and problems that an organization faces. Historical forces gives way to have a strategic thinking, gives an opportunity for managers to see the bigger picture and to practice its conceptual skills. The historical forces to management thought consist of social, political, and economical forces that have greatly influenced organization and the practice of management. The social forces refers to those parts of the culture that guide and impact connections among individuals that ask the questions, what do people value? What do people need? And what are the standards of behavior among people? These forces shape the social understanding, principles, and observations about connections among the individuals, the workers, and the executives. A critical social force today is the evolving perspectives, thoughts, and estimations for the new age workers who are young, thought, and innovatively capable. Profession life cycles are getting more limited with workers changing career every few years, and there is a developing focus on their aspect of work and life balance that can be seen in the employee that works outside of the employer's office. The political forces refers to the impact of political and lawful establishments on individuals and businesses. Political forces incorporate essential presumptions hidden in the political framework. For example, the attractive quality of self-government, property rights, contract rights, and equity. Developing misunderstanding in other countries make difficulties for the country's businesses and administrators. Individuals are demanding for empowerment, cooperation, and accountability in all aspects of their lives. The economic forces refers to the accessibility, creation, and dissemination of resources in a general public. Organizations expect resources to meet their targets. The economy of the world is moving with the sources of wealth, distribution, and decision making. The new developing economy depends to a great extent on thoughts, data, and informations. Factories have been improved by advanced innovations, and the trend nowadays shows the significance of small and medium-sized businesses. We hope you had fun learning. From all of us from Group 6 Yellow Green, thank you for listening.